I love the fact that I embraced being vulnerable. It's always been that way ever since the situation in elementary school, and I'm going to talk about that later. But this thing with my skin stuck with me all the way through high school because I have something called eczema. And for those of y'all who don't know what eczema is, it's a skin disorder. And it was rough growing up, especially in elementary school. I don't know about y'all, but to me, elementary kids can be the worst. But it got better, you know what I'm saying? Like in junior high and especially in high school, people matured out, right? But the thing with my skin, it always caused a problem, well, at least in my mind. Here it is, fast forward when I'm 16 years old and I meet my wife, the woman who I said to myself and my cousin, hey, this is going to be my wife. This is the woman I'm going to marry, right? I said that at 16 years old. And I was like, you know what? In the spirit of vulnerability, I'm like, I need to show her my skin. We need to go ahead and nip this in the bud right now because ain't going to be no future if she can't get past my skin, right? And so I showed her my skin and she looked at it and said, oh, that's cute. What? When I showed somebody my skin coming up, it was a lot of reactions, but it was never, oh, that was cute. But imagine what would happen if I never worked up the courage to show her. We would have never got married. We would have never had kids. Nothing like that, right? This chick from Columbus, Ohio, and this boy from Lawton, Oklahoma would have never hooked up had I wimped out and chosen not to be vulnerable. We're going to come from the subject, embrace your vulnerability. Let's get it. Thanks for watching That Christian Fam. If growing in the faith is important to you, hit that subscribe button because over here we encourage, empower, and give you everyday practical Christian advice on real life situations. We drop videos every Tuesday and Friday at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. So while you're at it, go and hit that notification bell because for the first hour, we respond to comments immediately. All right, y'all, I want to talk about embracing your vulnerability, and I want to talk about it in two areas. The first area is in relationships, and the second area is in leadership. Vulnerability in relationships. I think it's so important to be vulnerable in relationships because there's been so many people that's been duped by facades in dating and marriage. Allowing yourself to be vulnerable is fair to the other person and is liberating to you. Vulnerability is based on trust. So if you trust the person you with, you need to allow yourself to put your guard down and be vulnerable with them. Now, if you don't trust them, you need to ask yourself, why are you with someone you don't trust? Is it because they gave you some reason not to trust them, or do you have trust issues? Either way, it's a situation that needs to be discussed. Far too many times people are reluctant to be vulnerable with the person they're currently involved with because of a past relationship. And because of that, they keep hitting walls and having bad breakups because they punish the current person based off the past sins of someone else. Let's move on. If this is adding any value to your life at all, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Number two, vulnerability and leadership. If you're in leadership and struggle with putting up a facade, you might find commonality with others, become more relatable, and therefore more people are willing to follow you. Let's go to the word. I ain't no journalist, but y'all know what's up. This is in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 7 through 10. It says, this Paul speaking, says, so to keep me from becoming conceited because of the surpassing greatness of the revelations, a thorn was given me in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to harass me, to keep me from becoming conceited. 3 times I pleaded to the Lord about this, that it should leave me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Verse 10, for the sake of Christ, then I am content with weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities. For when I am weak, then I am strong. Why did Paul write this in his letter to the church at Corinth? He wrote it so they could see that God's grace is sufficient for anything, but he also wrote it so he could show commonality with other people. He knew if he painted himself to be perfect and if his prayers were always answered the way he wanted them to be answered, then everything that he wrote and every way that he encouraged them to live would seem unattainable because he would come off not real. If you come off as a standard of perfection, then people don't feel like they can ever attain it because no one can ever be perfect. No one. The only perfect person that ever walked the face of the earth was Jesus Christ. As finite human beings, the mark of a good leader is not someone that has everything right. The mark of a good leader is someone who's willing to lead, be transparent, and strive to get things better. Lastly, I want to talk about vulnerability and shame, because I think far too often shame keeps us from being vulnerable and causes us to forfeit the rewards of vulnerability, like freedom, peace of mind, a good night's sleep, being comfortable in your own skin. Those are the rewards of being vulnerable. All right, let's go back to the elementary school situation. So I remember back in the day, like we had music class and stuff, and I forget what activity we were doing, but whatever activity we were doing, it called for us to take off our shoes. And like, I started to take off my shoes and I realized, oh shoot, I got a hole in my sock. And it was a small hole too. I'm like, dang, really? But anyways, we were supposed to take off our shoes. Like, who takes off their shoes in music class, right? Like, I never would have thought I would have had to do that. And so, like we talked about, elementary school kids can be really mean, right? And so I was like, man, bump that. I ain't taking off my shoes. And my music teacher was like, oh, you know, Jermaine, you supposed to take off your shoes. And I was like, nah, I ain't gonna take off my shoes. You know, so she sent me to the hallway to sit on the bench and stuff. And she even gave me an opportunity. She was like, hey, young man, you know, why you don't want to take off your shoes? You usually are well behaved and all this other stuff. Why you rebelling? And she was like, do you have a hole in your sock or something? And I was like, nah, I ain't got no hole in my sock. I ain't even want to admit it to my music teacher, right? And so she just let me sit there, and I missed out on all the activity of that day. And I heard them in there having fun, laughing, joking, and all that other stuff. And I'm like, dang, man, like I'm missing out on all the fun. And I was like, you know what? And I really said to myself, I was like 7 years old. I was like, why am I sitting out here? Like, why do I care about what they got to say about me having a hole in my sock? Like, what's the worst that can happen? Like, I really said that at 7 years old. What's the worst that can happen? And it seemed like it unlocked something in me. From that point on, I was like, you know what? I don't care what nobody else got to say. I'm gonna just do what I need to do. I'm gonna be the person I am, and it is what it is, right? And I remember like a month or so later, we had to take off our shoes or whatever, and I took off my shoes carefree because I'm like, yo, I don't care if I have a hole in my sock or not. It is what it is. And then one of the times I believe I did have a hole in my sock, and one of the kids said something, but it was so quick, I just disregarded it. I could care less. I didn't care what they had to say because I was going to be comfortable in my own skin, and I wasn't going to be held captive to what they had to say about me. I know who I am. I know who my parents are. I know who my siblings are. And this was before I even knew Christ, but I became comfortable in my own skin. And it seems like that mentality just stuck with me all the way. That's why I really believe it gave birth to this mentality I have. Like, I really don't care. It's borderline nonchalant, but not quite. I feel like I have a healthy measure of concern when it comes to the feelings of others and how I carry myself. But in the grand scheme of things, when it comes down to negativity, I don't care what people say or think, because regardless of how much I try to appease them or win their approval, people gonna say and think what they want to regardless. So listen, y'all, embrace your vulnerability. You might find that it's a lot lighter than that facade you're trying to carry.
I come from the ground, I go to the sky. I'm a spirit, I'm soulful, but physically fly. I like rings cause they never end, like dreams of a veteran that's been in war, been dispatched, but still Confederate.